Of course I think we can win, and I'm fighting every single day to win.
We've now put forward a plan that... Is that bird worrying you?
Yeah. They're afraid of us. They can see that our movement is growing.
Well, you're not going to have a stand in the Parliament.
Let there be 1,000 lessons learned as far as I'm concerned.
This is the 4ZZZ Break the Election podcast for the Queensland state election in 2024.
Hello, and welcome to 4ZZZ Breaks the Election podcast, just 9 days from the 2024 Queensland state election. My name is Alexis Pink, I'm the news coordinator at 4ZZZ. Joining us today are...
Liv, Sophie,
and Joel
from our 4ZZZ newsroom. Hello everyone, how are we doing?
Great, how are you?
In this podcast series, we'll be bringing you up to date on the election and breaking down what is being said and why. First story, Liv, what have you got for us?
Queensland Premier Stephen Miles and Opposition Leader David Crisafulli met for the second and final debate last night ahead of the state election. The debate saw the political opponents meet at the Queensland Media Club in front of a crowd of 600 voters, continuing to push the issues that have defined their election platforms. The Labor leader and former Minister for Health pressed Crisafulli on the LNP's stance regarding abortion, citing 131 instances where Crisafulli failed to answer questions on abortion policy, a pattern that continued yesterday when the Liberal candidate stopped short of ruling out a conscience vote. Similarly, Miles was dogged by Crisafulli over commitments to a youth crime crackdown, with Miles not directly responding to questions of whether a re-elected Labor would introduce adult crime, adult time proposals.
Interesting debate again. So did anyone catch the debate?
I did not catch the debate.
So it was actually hard to find a visual of this that was going out live. I had to catch up with it later as well. Also read a few things about it. Some very familiar topics. Once again, it feels like a repeat of the first debate, it would seem to me. What were your thoughts on it?
I've heard a lot about Crisafulli dodging those questions about abortion, and that is getting increasingly concerning, I would say.
Yeah, it has been the feature of the last week and a half of campaigning for the LNP. It certainly isn't getting much better. Anyone have any thoughts on Stephen Miles and his performance?
I suppose I heard that it wasn't quite as good as the first time around, but I didn't watch it, so I can't say personally. Generally, though, I did hear that there weren't many new topics brought up in the debate, which I suppose makes sense coming this close to the election. It is kind of just reminiscent of the general stiffness in both major parties that I think we see in Australia time to time.
Indeed. So are there things that you wanted those leaders to say, topics that they missed that you really wanted to hear about?
I think young people want to hear about cost of living and the housing crisis, and they want to hear what is being done to help, but that's not being brought up as much as people would like, I think. Yeah,
so for me, the environment was a real miss. That no one is talking about the environment other than occasionally the Greens are mentioning it, which is probably not good news. I'm also fairly underwhelmed with their approach to infrastructure in this election, especially moving away from car-based technology to just about anything else. Public transport has been mentioned quite a lot, but not the infrastructure behind public transport. And that's something I really wish they'd focused on, but apparently not what people wanted to talk about. Let's move on to the second story. Sophie, what do you got?
LNP health spokeswoman Ros Bates suggests Family First Party as second preference on the How to Vote card. The Family First Party is distinctly anti-abortion, claiming that it is the human rights issue of our generation and aims to protect pain-capable babies. When pressed on why this party was placed as second preference, Ros Bates stated that she would rather not preference anyone. However, Bates has historically spoken against abortion and the 22-week limit for termination without medical need. Despite LNP leader David Crisafulli insisting that the current laws will not change, he has refused to state whether his members of parliament will have a conscience vote. Bates, however, has stated that she supports a conscience vote.
Well, back to abortions again.
Yes.
It's going fairly pear-shaped. So let's talk about how to vote cards and preferences for a little while. Yep. So in Queensland we have compulsory preferential voting, which means our how to vote cards, the ones from political parties, also need to show other political parties listed in order so people vote validly when they go into the polling booth. So why is it important that Family First was placed second on Ros Bates' ticket? Why is that an important thing to see?
Because she is part of the Liberal Party, so a lot of their MPs and David Crisafulli have been denying and like not speaking about their stance on abortion, but her voting family first second endorses the pro-life view.
And that is the key thing here, the endorsement.
Yeah, it's not
actually an endorsement. Obviously, she's endorsing herself for Parliament, but she is saying to her voters, if it's not her, she'd have family first.
Yeah.
That's definitely saying something.
For sure.
So this is the problem with Christopher Lee's stance at the moment, because he's been pretty clear, right? He's saying it's not an issue for the LNP.
But it
Do you
clearly
believe him?
is.
No.
Not at all. Not when this is happening.
Yeah, the problem isn't Christopher Lee and how clear he's been, as much as the Labor Party have been making it that. It's about the way the party and their MPs have been talking about it.
For sure.
It's undermining that message about not addressing this thing.
Yeah.
All right, third story. Joel, what do you got?
Max Chandler-Mather, Greens federal MP for Griffith, has called both the Labor and Liberal Party out for the current state of the housing system. In a Facebook post made after Anthony Albanese's recent house purchase, Max flamed major party politicians for supporting current housing tax legislation that personally benefits them. He stated that by opposing the Greens' affordable housing initiatives, Labor is also opposing the majority of Australians who seek meaningful action on the housing crisis.
Certainly an interesting state of affairs. Certainly Anthony Albanese buying a $3.4 million Central Coast house in New South Wales is tactically poor. Might be the friendly way of saying that.
Perhaps.
Getting close to retirement, maybe. Who knows?
Well, forced retirement, maybe, if it keeps going like this.
Yeah.
Certainly that last news poll wasn't very good, but what are your thoughts about Anthony Albanese's big house purchase?
I think it does show a certain lack of tact for the viewer and for his voters, but it's not the be-all and end-all. You know, people are going to buy a big house regardless of their political position. I don't think that he was really thinking about how this would affect his votes when he did it at the time.
Well, admittedly, when he went to a press conference and said, I'm doing quite well, pretty much saying to people, I have a lot of money and I'll buy whatever I like.
I think it is a bit insensitive at the moment when there's so much homelessness, so many people can't afford a house, rent issues are terrible. It's kind of a bit on the nose to go and buy such an expensive house.
So to be fair to the Prime Minister, there are a lot of MPs who buy lots of houses that are quite expensive, and he is just one in many in that sense. It might have been tactically poor, but it's not illegal.
Yeah.
No.
Max Chandler-Mather is trying to make a federal issue a state one, and it is a state issue. Housing is dealt by both the federal and state governments. Federal provides quite a lot of funding. State provides the actual housing part of it. This is fertile ground for the Greens, you would say? What are they looking to see happen?
I think they're looking for their listeners and their followers to recognise that a recognisable name, such as Anthony Albanese, has done this, and then leveraging our interest in that, explain the current state of the housing crisis a little bit better in the context of what people with money can do in terms of buying second properties, buying more expensive properties, and also show potentially that Labor and Liberal are being self-centred in their votes.
All right, that's actually not unreasonable. And considering that both the ALP and the LNP have ruled out basic things like rental caps, which do work and don't work in some cases. There's definitely arguments on both sides of that. As well as things like a bigger spend on housing stock. Labor has been much more interested in buying more housing stock. The LNP has been a bit cagey about it. But, it's maybe not the best look if you were trying to convince renters that this was a good approach. All right, we should probably end it there. And that's all we have for 4ZZZ Breaks the Election podcast today. For more updates, you can find us on 4ZZZ in our morning bulletins, Brisbane Line on Tuesdays, Thursdays and Saturdays and at midday. And make sure to catch the Pineapple Rebellion at 9 a.m. on Fridays. If you want to support the project, subscribe to 4ZZZ at 4ZZZ.org.au/support. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll be back tomorrow. Goodbye!
Goodbye!
Bye-bye!